At the time, it was only 10 cogs in the space that we used to put 8. Now we put up to 13 cogs in that same rehab body. Like your margin for error gets way smaller. And so that was kind of I don't know, you could call it a cornerstone product of the tagline, precision is our religion, right? There's a lot of, we spend almost as much time inspecting the parts that go into the hag as we do making
them. Before starting Abbey Tools, which happened by accident, Jason Quaid was working as a welder. He was sparking together things like nuclear-grade pressure vessels and airplane parts, but his heart was in the bike industry. He spent some time as a race mechanic, and one of his friends from that world asked him to weld something. That tool changed Jason's life. Abbey now makes the most beautiful, precision-crafted tools you'll see in any industry. Luckily for us, Jason only makes them to work on bikes. You may not need a $1,500 truing stand or a $190 titanium hammer, but you might want to have a look at Abbey's T-Way tool or 4-way multi-tool, both of which are very handy for the home mechanic. Despite a function-first ethos, Abbey has turned bike tools into elegantly engineered art pieces that top mechanics drool over. Have a listen as he talks about Abbey's origin story, the growth of his company, and running a manufacturing business in Bend, Oregon. I'm Cam McCrae, and this is the NSMB podcast. Jason Quaid, welcome to the NSMB podcast. It's nice to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out.
I'm happy to have you on. It's great. I'd like to start off with how you'd introduce yourself to somebody if they asked you about your life's work. How would you describe that?
It kind of depends on what the setting is. Just telling people that you're a toolmaker seems very obvious. Like, oh, I make tools, but then people don't. That's like, huh? Sometimes I just joke and tell people that I measure things for a living, which is pretty accurate. Spend a lot of the day with micrometers in my hand and QC and parts and whatnot. And then, it is. But then if you talk to somebody from kind of more of a manufacturing background, to them, toolmaker kind of implies tool and die, which is a small part of what we do here. We do have to make tooling for the tools that we make, oddly enough. But so it just kind of depends on what the context is. But I was a welder by trade and kind of fake being a machinist, and here we are making bike tools.
How did you get into welding?
It was kind of this. My dad's an electrician, so this kind of like skills trade thing was something that was familiar to me growing up, and it was like a trade that I felt that I could go learn and then still potentially apply it in the bike industry. A couple of years after I finished trade school, Trek and Cannondale both kind of abandoned what little metal bike production that they still had left in the U.S. and that went away. And so I built everything from nuclear grade pressure vessels to certified airplane parts. So kind of like running the gamut. And so, first welding job was building giant heat exchangers for the power generation industry, and thin material was 1/2 inch up to about 6 inches. And, you picked up everything with a crane or a forklift, like you weren't lugging anything around by hand. So in comparison to what we do now, like it's fun to look back on. I'm glad I don't do it anymore.
Much heavier lifting, obviously.
And in some ways it's easier because you just know that you can't pick it up. So like, oh, we got to go get the crane, whatever.
So we talked about at Sea Otter about the origin story of Abbey Tools, but I'd like to hear it again.
For sure. So I've also tried to run away from industrial forever, or from the bike industry a few times. and yeah, had kind of gone back and forth when I found myself unemployed at the kind of the bottom of the recession. It was running a service department of a bike shop here in Bend that had gone out of business during the recession, and decided that I was going to go to USA Cycling's race mechanic clinic. Over the couple of years leading up to that, had worked a bunch of kind of national championships or Cascade Cycling Classic, um, road and cross races here in Bend, Oregon, and then uh, wanted to go to this clinic and just never, the scheduling never worked out. And so I finally was unemployed, went on a whim, met a guy named Jeff Crombie. And so Jeff and I stayed in touch. Jeff also kind of had a background in aviation, used to be a helicopter mechanic in Canada, and had gotten out of that. Jeff and I stayed in touch, and then one day he called me up and said, "Hey, do you have a Shimano quick release skewer?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think so." And he's like, "Can you go out to your garage and check?" He's like, "Does that nut fit in the lock ring tool?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Drill a hole in that, weld a handle to it, and mail it to me. Let me know what I owe you." Jeff at the time lived outside of Calgary, and so I did what he asked, and I was like, "This is a pretty good idea." So before Jeff even got that tool, I ordered 20 or 30 other, cheap lockering tools, and made a small batch of these things in my garage. Borrowed, used a lathe at work at this part-time job that I had in the winter, um, to drill the holes out of the stock tools. Like, got this DIY black oxide kit, and dipped them in the garage to rusting, and then gave them to some other race mechanic friends. Um, and then that was what, 13 years ago. So like that was that phone call was like January, February. And by the end of April, I got a phone call from some random guy that was a friend of a friend from the race mechanic community that was out on the East Coast somewhere. He's like, "Hey, are you that guy that made that thing?" I'm like, I think I know what you're talking about, but like, I'm a guy. I've made lots of things. Which which one are you talking about? And so he was like, that was kind of the moment where I was like, all right, let's make a batch of these for sale. And so the first batch of those tools, we worked with a local machine shop here in town that's still a vendor of ours to this day. Um, and they made heads specifically for us. We got half-inch bar stock remnants from another job that they made parts with, and that's where the original handles came from. And for 2 or 3 years, that's where all of our handle stock came from. Were overruns from this other job that they ran a ton of, and so that was kind of rad, and this weird little bit of upcycling and repurposing of things. And yeah, so we made, it was probably around 100 tools out of that first batch, and went through the pit at Cascade Cycling Classic, a long-standing road race that we had here in Bend, and I sold one to every mechanic that had money in their pocket. And I was like, huh, okay. And then anybody that didn't have money like came and found me the next day and bought one. And some people bought a second one because sometimes people would have multiple toolboxes, and one at home and one with a team truck or whatever. And I was like, this kind of feels like we're onto something. So yeah, sent the last two tools out of that batch off as press samples. Like, I'd never been part of a product launch or anything like that before. And I just sent them to two editors that I enjoyed reading their stuff. And
who was that?
It was Zach Overholt at Bike Rumor and Nick Legan who was writing for Velonews at this point. So
I know both those guys.
Yeah, so it was Nick's very last piece that was published for Velonews, which was kind of cool. And we still have like Nick's pull quote from that articles up on like a trade show piece that we use as a backdrop at like Made and whatnot. So, but yeah, and Nick was he's like, "This thing's awesome. Like, I want to buy more of these." And I'm like, "Well, I'm out, but I'm making more." Like, and so Nick and I are still, all three of those guys, or both of those guys are still friends to this day. So it's been kind of cool. But yeah, and then we do this product launch. Like we had a website up, but it was like there was no e-com component to it. So I'm like, Shopify was maybe a year or two old at this point. So I'm like, had a friend in the tech world that had recommended them as a platform, and I'm like trying to figure all this stuff out. Like it's literally just me. Um, and yeah, like build a website, have all these email lists. But like the weird thing was maybe a third of the emails were like, "What else do you make?" And like people just saw the execution of the original Crombie tool, and they're like, "That's really cool. You've got to have something else up your sleeve." But that was literally it. Um, so we kind of get over that, and then things start flowing. And then it took a couple of years to like, all right, this is what I'm gonna do, and kind of stopped um, working on bikes remote in town, and then stopped doing event work. To kind of phase that out over the next couple of years. But yeah.
I mean, 100% sell rate, more than 100% sell rate for your customers is pretty good. So that's pretty good market research to start off with. So obviously you can scale up production of the Crombie tool. How do you follow up something that's so successful and such a good idea? I have no idea what your second tool was.
I think it was the chain whip. Was close to the second one. Yeah, and so I mean, the reply to those people that said, "What else do you make?" is like, "Well, what do you want us to make?" And so obviously a cassette lockering tool and a chain whip, two tools that get used together. Yeah, so that one was kind of an easy add. I think the Geisler, the Turing stand adapter, which Josh Geisler was another team mechanic friend of mine that was at the same clinic. So even though he didn't really have a whole lot to do with the development of that tool, we named it after him. And then we did, I think Shimano came out with either a Dura-Ace or an XTR group set that needed the smaller socket. And so that was an opportunity that we kind of jumped on of like, oh, here's a tool that everybody's going to have to buy. Let's offer that too. And like, we're small and agile. We can be faster to market than a lot of the established players. And so, yeah, now bottom bracket tools are kind of I don't know, a staple for us. Like we probably do more of the weird stuff that everybody else doesn't think is worthwhile. And yeah, we plug away.
Just little niche products.
Yeah. And then the HAG was the hanger alignment gauge was kind of the one that a lot of people had asked for. And it was like, all right, what do we need to do to make this tool excel? Those tools of that type really hadn't been updated a whole lot in a long time, and they just didn't have the accuracy that I felt modern bikes benefited from. Right, the straighter that hanger is, the better the bike's going to shift. And now that we're putting, at the time it was only 10 cogs in the space that we used to put 8. Now we put up to 13 cogs in that same rehab body. Like your margin for error gets way smaller. And so that was kind of I don't know, you could call it a cornerstone product of the tagline, "Precision is our religion," right? There's a lot of, we spend almost as much time inspecting the parts that go into the HAG as we do making them. And so there's a lot of nitpicky things that go into that to make them easy to assemble, but then also make them really easy to use and really accurate, right? There's a lot that goes into keeping all the last little bit of play out of the head of the HAG so that it doesn't amplify when you're up at the rim taking a measurement.
So I'm curious about your ramp up when you went from making a few of the Crombie tool on your own, and all of a sudden you need some volume. And were you working out of your garage at first? What?
Yeah. So, was working in the garage, had a TIG welder, a couple other, basic hand tools. Thankfully the CNC shop had, the machines that were great to make the little splined heads for us. Um, they made them on these Citizen Swiss style lathes for people out there that understand that kind of stuff, but which are machines that are usually reserved for really high volume production, hundreds of thousands of pieces. People will set up jobs and run them for months nonstop. So the fact that they would do stuff at a scale of several hundreds, maybe up to 1,000 pieces for us, is pretty unique in the Swiss world, or Swiss machining world. So yeah, we didn't have any constraints there. It was really more just like my travel schedule, and that was kind of the first thing to get culled. Right? It's like, no, I can't go to Europe again to go work another bike race. I can't go do this or that. And so that stuff started to fall back. So worked out of the house for 2.5 years or so, and then we were in our first industrial space, that felt huge at the time, and now it's looking back on it, it's like, man, we couldn't fit, a quarter of our machinery in there, much less have space to move around. So yeah, and then things like employees got added to, do things, and I mean, at heart, we're definitely a manufacturing company, so that's kind of um, driven a lot of that. Like, there's a lot of labor that happens under our roof. Um, so, and then there's been some other big steps. The first batch of decades were made by that same machine shop, and it didn't go super smooth. And that's what led us to buying our own live tool dual spindle lathe. And so now in that one machine, we went from making 15 to 20% of our parts in house to like 80. Um, and so, yeah, we can do, I mean, kick out Crombie tools all night long while nobody's here, which is pretty awesome.
That's pretty nice.
How you have to do it if you're going to make things domestically. If you're going to make your own stuff in a first world country, you kind of need to invest in that lights out automation, manufacturing, and be able to do that. So, I mean, what we're doing isn't at a super high level, but it still allows us to keep up.
So how many people do you employ at this point?
There's 5 of us, so not a huge outfit by any means.
And what are their respective titles?
So we've got a customer service guy that kind of does all the order fulfillment as well. We have a machinist. We have a back end kind of, non-producer, that just keeps track of all of the bookkeeping and the margins and all that stuff. And then I still weld everything that we ship at this point.
Oh, wow.
Hasn't always been that way. We've brought in some other help over time, and then I still do kind of product development stuff as well. So, and then a couple of people doing assembly tech type of things, and then some part finishing. So,
do you still have any of your original batch of Crombie tools?
Yeah, so it's kind of at some point, and I don't know if you had the same moment with NSMB, but you kind of like realizing that you're building something that's going to be around for a while and is going to, like, people are into it. And so, yeah, I've got a box of prototypes and, early development things. At some point, we'll put it in a display case and put it in the front room. But at this point, it's literally just a box of old stuff. The very first Crombie tool that I made for Jeff is in there. 4 or 5 years ago, he immigrated to the United Kingdom. And so when one hops countries across bodies of water, you purge your life. And he's like, I think you'd probably like to have this back. So he sent it to me. But yeah, kind of cool.
So I can imagine that compared to what the Crombie tool looks like now, that one looks a little bit rudimentary, or is there not a dramatic difference?
No, it's quite a bit different. I could definitely get you some some photos for show notes or something if you want. But the first ones were literally just like 1/8 inch thick, inch wide flat bar handles that I kind of like had hand notched on a bandsaw to fit around an off the shelf lockering tool that had like the 1 inch hex drive on it, and just kind of welded them. Did some, I think out of the first batch, there were 2 or 3 double sided tools that had a Shimano on one side and a Campanile on the other. Um, and then, yeah, you look through like some of the other tools in that box. Some of them are really crude. Um, some of them go from like a beta batch of Hags. Doesn't look all that much different than what we ship today. Um, but yeah, it's kind of interesting to see the evolution. Like there's been, and even since we've been to production, we've done a couple of small tweaks to the Crombie tool. I remember Nick Legan was like, "Hey, can you make the spline depth longer so that it'll work with a Stein hyper handle?" Which was kind of his chain whip style tool of choice, and it required a little more depth so that you could put put that plate style deal that had the 3 nubs on it. So Jim Stein was the first guy to do that. Since then, a couple of people have knocked it off. But yeah.
So I'm wondering when you went from making tools that were utilitarian, but in your words, a little bit crude, to making ones that are almost have become fetish objects, that they're like jewelry and beautiful. And when was that a gradual evolution, or did you decide one day to start making things beautiful?
I feel like it was pretty much from the get go. It was, people that use tools for a living want things that look good, right? People like shiny things, and so it was like, hey, if we're going to put all this other work into these tools and pay attention to these specific angles on the inside of a cassette lockering tool, why are we going to shortchange and do sub rate finishes, right? We're gonna hand weld all these things and they're gonna look pretty good. Why go through all these other things and then cut off that last piece of it? So the very first batch or 2 of tools were all like a satin bead blast, so they kind of had that kind of moot titanium-esque look to it, even though they weren't tie. And we would get people all the time that were like, "Oh, those tie cassette tools." Well, they're not titanium, but they had that look. And then we went to like a burnished finish, which is kind of a little shy of a polish, just because it was faster and required less labor. So, but that machine, I mean, you basically put the tools in it, and there's a bunch of vibratory finishing media in there, and it kind of shakes the crap out of them until they're shiny. And so for the first 2.5 years that we were making tools, that machine was in my garage on the other side in the kitchen. And so it would be running sometimes till 10 o'clock at night. My wife would be like, "Are you seriously still working on tools?" And you're like, "Yeah."
How loud was it?
It wasn't so much that like the decibels were loud, but it just shook.
Oh,
and
wow.
so it was like, I mean, you would just feel the vibration in the house. So yeah, I mean, there were times when it would run 18 hours a day. Like I'd get up and make coffee, and then I'd go turn the tumbler on and throw tools in it. So, and then it would run till 10, 11 o'clock. And so now, thankfully, it's in its like sound insulated room, and it doesn't. It's miserable to be in there, but you don't really need to be in there for more than 5 minutes. So, but yeah, you can close the door and have a normal conversation just outside of it. So,
when did you go from? Obviously, you started out making tools for professional mechanics, and not even professional shop mechanics, but professional mechanics at the pointy end, the ones who were working on the best riders in the world's bikes. When was the transition to starting to make products first for mechanics in shops and then for Joe Consumer?
Yeah, I mean, on some level, there was never um, an like an opposition or like designing away from what a home mechanic or even a shop mechanic needs. Um, one of the cool thing, like to back up just a hair, Cascade Cycling Fest, where we sold those first tools, was always held in the month of July, kind of halfway through the Tour de France. It just picked up, which even though I, like your readership, is all mountain bikes at this point, but there's a big bike race in France. It just finished. Fast forward 12 and a half months, we had tools with 4 different teams at that race. So it's like that was a pretty cool moment and something that we shared with all of our vendors early on of like, we're doing this thing at a pretty cool level. Like, hopefully you guys can see the pride that we have in this, and you guys are definitely pivotal in helping us do this. But yeah, I mean, we never really shied away from or like designed outside of what a shop or home mechanic needed. It was more just, because I came from that race support background, kind of had the ear of those guys, and they were like, hey, this tool would be awesome if it were lighter, if it were shorter, if it fit my toolbox. And I think it maybe only in the last 3 or 4 years have we really kind of started to do tools that are aimed more at a home mechanic than they are at a race tech, right? Like something like a chain wear tool. If you're a race mechanic, you've got dozens. You get chains by the case, right? Just you think it's worn, just replace it. There's no need to measure it. SRAM, Shimano, KMC, whoever, like they're paying you money to have their equipment in good working order. Like just put a new one on. Right. So it's like then you look at the chainware tool and it's like that's way more of a consumer shop facing deal. But yeah, I think early on there was definitely a notion that we only made tools for team mechanics. I think if that was true, we probably never would have stepped outside of the garage. If we didn't make tools for anybody but professionals, we wouldn't be in the size building and the size crew that we have today. So I think, we definitely try to welcome anybody that wants to buy nice tools. So yeah, I think the durability standards and the functionality, the ergonomics are always going to be built around that professional use case. But at the same time, like, there's a lot more people that are willing to buy tools of that caliber that don't do it for a living. So
I'm wondering who, and you may not even know who is purchasing these things if they're purchasing them online, but who steps up for $190 US titanium hammer?
That's actually the least expensive titanium hammer on the market.
I believe it there. I didn't even know there were other ones.
There's Stiletto, I think, is the company that that's done titanium like framing and drywall hammers for tradespeople for a number of years. They've been out. I think all of theirs are north of $200 and have been for a while. So, yeah, that was the titanium hammer was one of the dumbest things that I feel that anybody had ever asked me to make, and then I made one and I was like, this thing's actually really awesome. And so I showed it, had it with me at a race, and a friend of mine was like, I want one. It's like, I don't have any more. It's like, well, you made that one, right? It's like, yeah. And he's like, well, effing make me another one. And I was like, it'll be expensive. And he's like, how much? And I just kind of like jokingly threw out like $200. And he's like, okay. I'm like, okay. And I think we sold the first batch of them. They were maybe 150. And I made all of those tie hammerheads on this old manual lathe in my garage. Yeah. And so I don't know, it's a fun tool to make. Getting smoke out of them, if that's your thing. Just kind of a nature of needing to purge the titanium gives it that pass through piece pipe flare. But yeah, so I don't know. It's but for people that do travel the world and they're working at a different parking lot every other day on the same bikes, like you think of what you need a hammer for on a bicycle that's reasonably well maintained, and it's not much. So like a titanium tapping hammer is actually kind of a cool little tool. It's never going to be anybody's only hammer that they own. Um, but it is kind of a cool application specific hammer. I've got one in my kitchen that I modified to be a meat tenderizer.
So the utility of it is that it's light for transport. And if you got a job where you don't need a lot of force, a lighter hammer works fine.
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely get a press fit bottom bracket or, bearings out, whatever. It'll do that stuff just fine. So
That's amazing. What is what are some of your most popular tools in different categories?
Yeah, I mean, the Crombie tool range has always been the cornerstone. The hanger tool, we sometimes say that it's a precision instrument surrounded by pry bars. Everything else is kind of crude. And so that's another cornerstone product for us. In spite of, recent developments in drivetrain technology, that tool still sells well. So thankfully the new Shimano group still needs a derailleur hanger. So kind of keen on that one. But yeah, I mean, I think the bottom bracket sockets do well because I feel like people know that we do everything. There's so kind of like, oh, we could go to Abbey and theirs at retail aren't really any more expensive than anybody else that you're going to cross shop us around. So we just know that they'll do it or have that option available. So yeah, and then there's some things that like the truing stand is a big ticket item. We don't sell a ton of them, but we only make a batch a year. They're out of stock more than they're in stock, but it's kind of just this thing of like we know that there's a finite market for $1,500 truing stands, and that's another one that I'm shocked at how many people have bought those that are not professional mechanics. Like whoa.
And they're
That
beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, they are one of those things we always try to dole out, to pack for trade shows, whether we're going to Sea Otter or here in about a month, we're going to go to the handmade show in Portland. Um, because people just don't get to see them, right? And they're like, hey, we want, maybe one of the more challenging things about what we do is you don't, kind of hard to sell pro grade tooling through photos, right? If you can't see it, if you can't pick it up, that you really, I don't know. Thankfully, I think our reputation is really strong, and so people are willing to give us the benefit of the doubt, read some reviews, realize that this stuff's very well regarded. But when you get something that's a little more personal and tactile, as like anything wheel building related, it gets a little tougher. So,
do you have the sense that people doing work on their bikes at home is on the rise or waning?
I'd love to know the answer to that question. I mean, I feel like during the pandemic, right, it was definitely blew up.
For sure.
Shops were months out. Um, dealing with reduced workforces, all of that stuff. I'm curious how many people hung on to that, and where in the cycling evolution or lifespan that person was when were they a long time cyclist, and then the pandemic hit and they wanted to start, they just were bummed that they couldn't get their stuff repaired at their favorite local shop, and so then they went out and bought tools so that they could do it themselves. Are they still doing it themselves, or if they reverted back to the professional? So yeah, be fun to know the answers to that question, but I don't, apart from just surveying everybody that orders tools.
So like everyone else in the bike industry, there was a big boom for you during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely saw it. I think as somebody that makes the majority of their parts in house, we were in a little bit better shape to deliver on that. Our fill rates throughout the pandemic weren't weren't farther out than about 8 weeks at any given point. which sounds crazy given that, some of the forecasts were like, oh, we're 2.5, 3 years out on product. So yeah, I don't know. And then it was nice that, at least for us, that people couldn't get that new wheel set or that new frame. And so they're like, well, I might as well fix what I've already got. Um,
And what about the rebound that the bike industry had? I mean, obviously you wouldn't have tons of overstock issues like some bike companies have now, but did you experience a lull, or maybe still not at all?
Not really. I mean,
that maybe answers our earlier question then.
yeah, 22, 23, 24 were all pretty similar. This year's different story, right? There's stuff going on in the world that's outside of our control, and it freaks a lot of people out. Yeah, but I don't know.
That's nice to not be as affected by that cycle as the rest of the industry.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of work for us to overstock something, right? It's a very you see tons of material that show up, and you see hours of spindle time getting used, and you see truckloads of things going to the anodizer, and then it comes back, and it's way more than an extra digit on a spreadsheet. It's just, that's kind of how contract manufacturing works, right? You're like, oh no, it changes from 100 to 500 pieces, one keystroke on a Excel form. It's a lot different. When you do that stuff kind of cradle to grave. So,
is there something? I mean, it may be two different questions. Whether you have a favorite tool that you make or have made, or something you're most proud of.
So favorite tools to make, obviously being a welder by trade, I love welding the hammers. To just sit down and melt titanium together is cool. It's fun. It usually turns out really well. I mean, I basically weld sticks to things. Our joints are super repetitive, and over the last 13 years, I've gotten pretty good at it. It's also really cool to machine the Harbor Gauge, which is our big billet aluminum dishing tool. So those go into the CNC mill as I think 28-pound raw block of aluminum. And then it comes out. We make 5 arches out of one of those billets. And just in the first op, I think we remove 18 or 20 pounds of material from that thing. And so it's cool to see modern machinery just zinging around big blocks of aluminum, and the metal shavings are hitting the cabinet. You can hear them, and when you open the door, you see kind of this steam roll out. It's like this is cool. At least I think so. But, yeah.
How long does it take to machine those out of that big chunk of aluminum?
I think we just did a batch of them out of our new mill this year, which is way faster. And I want to say it used to take us an hour just to do that first operation. And now it might be down to 25-ish minutes. So yeah.
What's your, what are the things you do in-house? And obviously you mentioned anodizing goes out. What are the things you do in-house and things that you don't?
So we do most of the machine work. There are some things like long, skinny parts that are tough for our machines to make. So things like the pin on the chain tool, and the big long handle, and then the part that actually threads into the derailleur hanger. We call that the T-bolt. Those are kind of too long and skinny for our machine, and so those get made on those Swiss machines that our original vendor does. Do all of our own mill parts, most of our own turning, except for those handful of parts. Anodizing goes to Tualatin, to a place that specializes in kind of outdoor recreation stuff. So they do a lot of parts for people that have a little bit more aesthetic, aesthetic issue or requirements than opposed to like an aerospace part where it's all about just dimensions and build rates and all of that stuff. So, and they do a bunch of other stuff for bike manufacturers in the Northwest. So, kind of nice to have them in our pocket. So we don't do any of our coatings in house. We do all of our laser part marking. We do all of our assembly, all the welding. Um, we started doing our own heat treat in house earlier this year. Which, if anybody's familiar with that, it can kind of be a cruel mistress, and a little bit of black magic. So thankfully, we've been pretty quick and easy ramp up on that. And the alloys that we're doing with that are a little more forgiving than some of the stuff that you would see in like high end knives or whatnot. But yeah, so it's
majority of it is in house for sure.
Yeah.
Which is pretty neat. There's not much of that happening on this side of the Pacific anymore.
Yeah, I mean, even our pre-hag, which is an injection molded plastic tool that's kind of meant to be a way to approximate derailleur hanger alignment without removing the derailleur. So that's an injection molded tool. Those are still made in bed. So even that thing that would have been ripe to send off offshore, my mindset's always been, hey, let's start local, and we'll start moving out as we need to, and find vendors. The closer somebody is to your to where you are, and I find that it's just easier to do work with them. I know a lot of people, that they're in charge of manufacturing. That happens all over the world, and they're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And on some level, I'm sure that they're right. But like, if you could drive 5 minutes away, or take a short bike ride to your injection molding shop, like, make your life easier. Especially when they're late and you're like, hey, it's really easy to ignore that email, but it's a lot. When I darken your doorstep, like, hey, where's my stuff?
What's the percentage of products that come from requests from mechanics, and the percentage that you dream up yourselves?
I think most of our product catalog has come at the request of either customers or our ambassador crew. It's every once in a while, like the chainware tool and the Decade, I think, were projects that I wanted to do. And then we still see, kind of ask the ambassador crew, it's like, all right, well, what are features that you guys want to see in this tool? What are things that you want to be able to combat, or handle in the field? And then just dealing with like some of the weird things that the bike industry has thrown at us historically. Chain spacing is definitely one of those things, and kind of getting into mountain biking. My first mountain bike was a 7-speed drivetrain. And so like, I've been through most of these changeovers in my lifetime, and I'm not even that old, but it's like, okay, well, how do we, let's make this little bridge thing, replaceable, so we can, realize that all the compatibility and chain is like the thickness of that little bridge that holds the link or holds the roller, and it's spacing to the backstop. So if we make this one little part comes out, then we can kind of, theoretically, hopefully, future-proof. We'll see. I'm sure now that I've put that into the world, somebody something super crazy that we won't be able to adapt the tool for. Hopefully, it doesn't sell well enough that we have to make it change. But yeah, it's maybe one of the biggest challenges of my evolution personally over the history of the company is like, I'm not a bike mechanic anymore. I still get out and ride, but I've never been all that hard on stuff, so I don't break a lot of things, and my own bikes don't need a whole lot of maintenance. And so, listening to people at trade shows that come up and hey, you should make this tool, and taking all those people seriously. Sometimes it's a super niche tool, Sometimes it's for things that are obsolete and it have been for decades. And you're like, all right, cool. And sometimes we order custom cutting tools and we see like what the costs are for those things, and it's like, yeah, we could make one of those, but like you're the only person in the world that wants one. Um, is that thing worth $1,000 to you? Because like that's the reality of what it's going to cost us to make it. And I don't say that to like scare people off, but it's like there's a lot of time that goes into this thing that you drew up on a napkin. Sometimes it's super simple and we can accommodate, right? Like custom bearing drifts, no big deal. We just go turn them on the lathe. Um, don't even do little napkin sketches and send them out with a bearing press or something. But yeah.
The way the industry is going, it's becoming a lot more electrified, both in bicycle propulsion and obviously componentry. Do you see opportunities there? Are there things that you can supply?
Something that we've always stayed definitely in tune with. I think for our customers' sake, not so much for us on a business standpoint, but all of the e-bike drive systems have been really good at recycling previously obsolete tool patterns. So things that a lot of shops, if they've been around for more than 10 years, probably have kicking around in a drawer somewhere from like an old ISIS tool, or I think somebody was using like the old XTR Octalink tool that had like 8 prongs or something, and that was the lock ring for their mid-drive chainring mount or something. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely the potential there for that to be open kind of another category of tools, and for us, but to date, it really hasn't brought anything through the door that is worth us making. So always happy to do OE projects with companies like that. We really don't have any desire to be, to start making bike parts. We just kind of want to be tool people. And we're definitely, I don't know, we're experts at that. Also can be a great resource if you don't want to ask your competitors what tool patterns are out there. Like, ask me. I'll respect those privileged conversations when need be, and can like, hey, here's the bottom bracket tool that you should use that will cover all of your fitments instead of you designing something proprietary by accident, which I've seen. We have multiple tools in our catalog that I feel fit into that realm.
So do the companies reciprocate and tell you when they're using a new standard and that you might want to build a tool for it?
It depends, right? We get OE requests from different manufacturers. Sometimes, earlier this year we launched the 9-tooth version of the Crombie for the new Shimano group set for that 945 cassette. Because that cog was so small, they needed basically they turned the cassette lock ring from an innie to an outie. Is maybe the best. So now it looks like a tiny bottom bracket. We got a heads up on that, through long-standing relationships. One of the guys that I used to work bike races with is now a product manager at Shimano. So pretty good friend to have. And yeah, so he, when we start hearing rumors and stuff, we'll make those phone calls and like, hey, are there, anything tool related with the new group set? And, a lot of times the answer to that question is no. Sometimes, yeah, we've got something. It's really just an optimization. I don't know if it would really make sense for a third party option. And then sometimes it's like, yes, we need a tool for this. And then ironically, sometimes we can have it to market faster than they can have a shop created
Nice.
to market. It just kind of depends, right? Like just, yeah, being small and nimble and being able to crank that stuff out. So, yeah. And then sometimes we think that we get notice on something and then come to find out that like it's different. And sometimes you don't want to be too early, because then you find out that like, oh, the dimensions shifted as they got closer to production. And then like these, so you're like, oh, I'm glad we only had 20 of those instead of like hundreds, because now they're all out of date. So
one of our guys is testing a new suspension product. I won't be too specific to out it, but the company in question, he needed to get it serviced, and the company in question didn't have the tools for it yet. And the product is released in the wild. Another one had to wait. It was a product he purchased, so it wasn't sort of going through media channels. And the shop he was getting it serviced at had to wait 6 months to get the product to service the suspension.
Yeah. That's a tough one, right? And once again, maybe that's where we could be a great resource for those kinds of companies to handle their tooling for them. But, yeah, and suspension, something, especially things at a high end, right? People are of the knowledge that like, hey, we need to maintain this stuff. It's like doing an oil change in a car. You don't replace this when it's broken. You maintain it preemptively so that you don't get those big repair bills and have to replace a CSU or whatever. But
are there any changes to the way you do business, or what your product line is going to look like in the near future?
I think we definitely chose an uphill struggle with our business model early on. That a lot of the bike industry works on this 3-tier pricing structure. So you'll for somebody like us, small to medium sized company, you're not going to do your own distribution and throughout the world. But our thought, so we don't offer shops a wholesale price on tools, right? Our thought's always been that we build tools for professionals and we price them for those customers. And it just makes more sense than handing out EP codes, all day long. So yeah, uphill battle, but something that at this point, I think our type of customer understands that. And when we're like, hey, think a little more Snap-on and a little less bike industry, they get it. I mean, we stand by those tools in those applications till we're blue in the face. If somebody breaks something, it's like, hey, we'll get it back. We'll either fix it or send you a new one, whatever. We want people to be happy with our tools for many, many years to come. But yeah, and then in terms of like new product stuff, I mean, we're always working on new stuff. We were a little short-handed earlier this year, and R&D tends to be one of the things that gets cut first. Being a pretty small crew, like we don't have people that are dedicated to doing product development, and so when I've got to go backfill whoever, then that's the stuff that we cut back on. So, but yeah, I think there's definitely some product categories that we're not present in that I think have changed a lot in the last 5 or 6 years across the industry that makes sense that we can actually do something innovative there or something that's different. We've always kind of shied away from doing what we think of as kind of like Me Too product. That it's like, oh, hey, let's go do an electric inflator. It's going to look just like everybody else's accessories, right? How many of those things do we need on the market at this point? Like I'd be shocked if those came out of more than one factory. And not that that's bad, but like, do we need to throw our hat in that ring? We're not people we don't have electronics as part of our core competency. So we would rely exclusively on the ability of a manufacturing partner. And that's just really not our MO. I love making stuff. And if we can't make something, it's got to be a really good tool to bring to market to justify that extra hurdle.
Maybe we need a green one. There's not a green one yet.
Yeah, Ace has whole row of spray paint. I'm sure they've got 10 different colors of green.
Have you used one of those? The jury's still out for me about whether they're something I would like to carry around.
I played with the neighbors for the first time last night. I don't know. I feel like they're just manufacturing e-waste at this point is kind of my hang up. I'm, I feel the cornerstone of sustainability is durability. Nothing about those really seems durable or serviceable long term. I'm not sure if it's really the way that the industry should be going. It seems that if we're going to be putting high end batteries in things that maybe like electric inflators isn't the best use of those resources. I don't know. Maybe I should go outside and yell at some clouds while I'm at it. But so
Yeah, I mean, for me, a little pump does the job. I mean, I guess the gauge is an advantage.
yeah,
But they make so much noise.
they get hot.
Yeah.
And then you're worried, like, is it charged? Is it not charged? If you're using it for pre-ride inflation, maybe a little less of an issue. If it's on the bike flat repair, like you kind of need that thing to work when you need it to work. Otherwise, it's worthless. So I don't know. I mean, and even using CO2, right? Those cartridges. They're a single metal. They're super easy to recycle. It's not this little brick full of all different kinds of things that needs to be, torn down and manipulated before it could be recycled. Assuming that was even worthwhile. So, on the rare occasion that I need to use a CO2 cartridge, I bring it back into the shop on Monday and I chuck it in the recycling bin with all of our other metals. It's pretty easy. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'll be a pump guy for many, many years to come.
So now that I know you're a mountain biker, I'd like to ask you about the kind of bike you ride, what kind of rides you do around Bend, and just about mountain biking.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully Ben's got gobs and gobs of mountain bike trails, so things around here don't get old too often. I usually ride like a 120 mil chassis bike. Although I have been really surprised and impressed with like 150, like the next class up, that kind of 140, 150 mil, and how efficient they are. And I kind of sometimes I scratch my head. I'm like, when are we going to start seeing like cross country race bikes that just have longer travel, but still have like more aggressive geometry, like something you'd find on a 120? Like it feels that suspension designs have gotten so good that maybe just classifying bikes by how much travel they have is a little dated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But for the last couple of seasons, I've been riding an Allied BC40. Was a bike that I originally got because I needed a UDH bike to run transmission on, to kind of evaluate tool considerations and whatnot, and just see like, hey, are there tooling considerations that we're not getting requests for that we might have? And we had some pretty good ones around that, and then kind of got a bit hamstrung by needing cooperation from drivetrain companies to play ball with us a little bit. And they're like, that's a great idea, but we're struggling to answer your questions. So I don't know, maybe at some point we'll bring that tool to market anyway. And then, gosh, probably 7-8 years ago, I built a custom 29er to kind of be the forever bike. I tend to turn over full suspension bikes every couple of seasons, and so I was like, I just wanted a bike that was kind of always like home based to use as a kind of old faithfully. So I've got freakishly long arms, so it's got a really long top tube on it. And a bike that just every time I throw a leg on it, I'm like, this bike feels perfect. So
cool. Are there still riding up in Smith Rocks? When I was there for a camp, we rode up there, and it was pretty cool place to ride.
Definitely a little more seasonal. I think people get out there in the wintertime and stuff because it's just so stinking hot. But given the location of it, it doesn't get a whole lot of snow. up there, so it can be good to hit that up in the wintertime. But yeah, I mean, CODA, our local trail advocacy maintenance crew, has been building a bunch of stuff out in the Ochoco's towards Prineville. Kind of, I think, is at the guidance of the Forest Service. Like, there's a lot of people kind of on the Deschutes National Forest, which is just west of Bend, and so they're like, yeah, let's encourage people to go to other parts. There's a lot of public land around here, so yeah.
So before I let you go, you've been very generous with your time. I've got two potential tool suggestions that will probably be totally useless, but I'll give them to you anyway. One is something to make the job of taping rims easier, because it's one of the very few tasks I have to do on my bike that I really don't like and struggle to get right. I've seen one where it's a jig that holds the wheel and spins it for you, so you've got both hands free to tape it, and it's at a company's wheel building facility. But that's obviously prohibitive for regular people. So that's one. The other one that I thought of while you were talking about drivetrains is something like a jig, perhaps, that would help you straighten your the cage on a T-type derailleur, because they're bent to begin with. So when it gets bent, it's really hard to bend it back to the right kind of bent.
Yeah, the right kind of crooked.
Yeah.
So the tape, what is it that you struggle with?
Getting bubbles out, getting a really good seal, sometimes just getting tape to stick to some rims. Like, the right tape will not stick to some rims. Carbon usually. Metal is easy, but if you're dealing with carbon rims, sometimes they just don't stick. Even, I've got them, given some friction to them with Scotch-Brite and done all sorts of things. But that's probably not a spot for a tool, but just something that...
It totally seems, I guess, this is not anything that I feel I've ever struggled with. And so I'm like, what am I doing differently than you? That's creating this gap in, or your request for a tool. Do you do them in some kind of a truing stand, or do you do them just loose, like on the shop floor?
I do it on the floor and provide tension with my feet to push the rim away.
Yeah. I don't know. I've always been well served by like putting the wheel in between two like shoulder width feet. And then you can kind of, like, I'm right-handed, so I'll hold the rim firmly with my left hand and then pull the tape pretty tight with my right hand. And then I can kind of guide it and stick down, 6 to 10 inches of tape at a time, and then kind of roll the wheel and do the same. And I don't usually fuss too much about, like, as long as I'm getting a seal in the flat parts of the rim, like right below the sidewall, let the tire do the rest. Right, like air pressure is going to stretch that tape out and push it into the rim bed. I don't know. It's always served me.
It's maybe just my skills.
Yeah, it is one of those things that in a production environment, to like have a machine to do that makes a lot of sense, to just pre-apply the tape. And I've seen some homegrown setups for that, as well as, I don't know if it's Holland Mechanics, the wheel building machine people. I don't know if they do the one that I've seen in places like the Santa Cruz Wheel Factory and whatnot, where they assemble all that stuff. And then the other one is actually pretty similar to the tool that we were scheming up.
Okay.
We kind of wanted a derailleur alignment gauge, and like, because transmission is a bit of an extreme example of those cages having like some funky geometry to them, right? Like they're bent from the factory in a very specific way, but knowing how they're bent is a bit interesting. And I guess those cages are still relatively expensive. So just because you can't theoretically replace them doesn't mean it's all that cheap. But
if you don't replace the whole mechanism, including the clutch, you can get just the aluminum for $42 here in Canada. So that's not too bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And so that's one of those things where sometimes there's a boundary of the information that a manufacturer is willing to provide us. I think at this point we've got a lot of trust. We try to be Switzerland of the bike industry and be pretty friendly with everybody. And so a lot of times we can get dimension drawings of stuff like that. And then sometimes, we ask for just something that they're not willing to do or provide, or there's a way that those parts are, go through quality assurance that doesn't lead itself to like a final location of where that cage should be. It's like and this is purely speculative, right? I don't know how the manufacturing of derailleurs works at the various different companies, but if they were to inspect all of the individual components and then they stick them together and then they just accept whatever those wherever it is where it is, but there's not like kind of an end result that's also gone through a quality control process. It could lead to like, we develop a tool and these brand new parts are coming out and they're not in compliance with the tool because we're kind of guessing on where these things are. They don't get built with that final step. And obviously what everybody is doing works because, mountain bike parts at this point work phenomenally well for pretty much everybody. So yeah, I mean, I don't want it to be construed as like a second-rate process by any means, but just kind of pure speculation there of what potentially is making it difficult to answer those kind of questions. To like, where does this hang into space, and are these surfaces that we're going to judge off of, are they something that has a level of a tight enough tolerance to be an inspection point or a datum is what we would call that, to like reference other dimensions off of. So it gets to be a very nuanced conversation. But I think you're definitely onto something there because now, I mean, $1,000 derailleurs are not uncommon, right? Yep. And you can get them from a multitude of different companies, and whether you're in a professional environment or a home tinker, you don't necessarily want to buy that derailleur as a troubleshooting step. You'd rather, like, hey, is this derailleur still a viable part? Is the cage still in alignment? You'd rather troubleshoot that and then go spend, okay, I'll buy the cage, or I think I need a whole new derailleur. Thankfully the guy I think his name's Aaron, maybe, at Madrone down in Southern Oregon is all of those, service parts and picking up where other stuff hasn't been traditionally supported is kind of a cool thing to be able to rebuild your derailleur
for sure
from the ashes. So yeah,
I did one of his kits. It worked really well. Yeah. All right. Well,
nice.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I said, yeah, it's cool to hear firsthand experience of that. So
yeah. No, it works great. Thank you very much for your time, Jason. It's been great talking to you, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with next in the tool world, and I'll continue to drool on your tools whenever I see them. I do have one from the T handle I got from SRAM.
Yeah,
which is great.
That's kind of how sometimes those OE projects turn out, right? Like that one started as an OE launch deal to hand out to journalists, and then now it's been in a catalog item for us for a couple of years. So you kind of never really know where new tools are going to come from.
Yeah, it's great. I use it all the time.
Nice.
Thank you very much, Jason.
No worries. Thanks.
Appreciate your time, and look forward to talking to you again.
Cool. Are you going to come down to Maine at all?
I I've got something in my schedule that I can't, and I'm not sure if anyone else is going to. We were talking about it in a meeting, and we'd all like to. So it's just a bit of a tricky time.
Yeah, I know. Billy's a friend of mine, and we've been chatting about moving dates and stuff around and whatnot. But definitely my favorite show of the year. Kind of that hand-built community always delivers. So
Yeah.
it'd be cool if get down there and come check it all out. So
it's tricky after spending 10 days at Crankworks to be able to bugger off again right away in the middle of summer.
Yeah. How do you feel like, is Crankworks good from a brand exposure standpoint, or is it just kind of all about racing and being up on the hill?
I think the expo is pretty well attended. We were just looking at the exhibitor list today, and we definitely spend a lot of time in there. And there's lots of. It's right in the middle of the Whistler Village, so there's lots of walkthrough, and I think lots of opportunities to talk to people.
Yeah, logistically, it seems like a really challenging. Like you got to tear down your booth every night, and
that's a pain.
And it seems like there's maybe a lot of really bad spots in the venue, in the expo area. So it's like, So
from that perspective, it would be a bit dodgy. We've exhibited way back in the day. We always used to go to one show every year, and it is a pain in the ass.
There you go. Yeah, all of a sudden it makes the hike in and out of Sea Otter feel like a walk in the park.
Yeah, that's right. Excellent. All right.
Glad we could finally make this happen.
Yeah, me too. It was very enjoyable talking to you, Jason. Totally appreciate it.
Have a good afternoon. Cheers.
You too. Bye-bye.